Michael, what did you make of Alistair Campbell's performance?
Well, I think it was indeed a reminder of, when Labour had control of the agenda, when they said what they thought and stuck to it. I thought it was a really robust performance. I don't think the inquiry made many holes in him, and I think most of what he told us we either actually knew or had intuited already.
Don't you think, maybe bar one member of this inquiry, he was pretty much treated with kid gloves?
Yeah, I mean, they're not great questioners.
No.
Information has come out through the inquiry, but not because of their forensic questioning. However, I don't like to talk too much about Alistair Campbell. He was basically there promoting himself and promoting his book, and what he always forgets...
Well, he was there because the inquiry asked him.
Yeah, he was there with some, but he took the opportunity not to enlighten the public, but to promote himself.
But what
there have now been two very key witnesses, and the inquiry has not been able to pin, firstly, where the 45-minute bit of information came from and what was its substance. And secondly, the way in which it appeared. I mean, it appeared in his foreword.
This is that we were within 45 minutes of a nuclear attack in some form. Well, British assets were.
Not nuclear attack, weapons of mass destruction, yeah. That they could be summoned at 45 minutes. And then earlier, John Scarlett said, oh, no, well, it should have said munitions, not weapons. And he was allowed to get away with that. And now, I mean, Alistair's not really been pinned down on how the Prime Minister could have said there was no doubt about this, when clearly there was doubt. There should have been doubt because the things didn't exist.
Well, the committee did not pin him down on how. We know the Joint Intelligence Committee said that the intelligence was sporadic and patchy and in places uncertain, and that appears as beyond doubt. Now, he was never pinned down on how patchy and sporadic became published as beyond doubt. Now, why wouldn't the committee do its job?
Because I've said this all along, and Michael disagreed with me, they're establishment trustees. So they're not really going to hold a knife to Campbell's throat and get him to tell the truth.
Do you think that Mr Campbell was in some way preparing the ground for Mr Blair's appearance? That everything he said had the fact that the former Prime Minister is going to appear afterwards? For example, I don't think he would have told us about these letters from our then Prime Minister to President Bush just because it was a revelation. There has to be a purpose as to why he made that public.
It's all stage managed. He would have been on the phone to Blair up until the last minute. I mean, it's all synchronised and stage managed.
Michael?
I entirely agree with that. I think Tony Blair is very edgy about this. I think Tony Blair thinks there's quite a lot at stake. He obviously tried very hard, firstly, for the inquiry to be held in camera, and secondly, for his own performance to be postponed to the other side of the election. There's no doubt at all that Alistair Campbell is loyal to Blair through and through, and presumably will be forever. And so, of course, this has been perfectly rehearsed. I can't myself at the moment put my finger on why it would be useful to have the President's letters revealed at this point, but I dare say there is a purpose.
We also saw with the subsequent testimony of the then Cabinet Secretary, Turnbull, how you almost felt that he was implying that he was kind of squeezed out. You saw what became Mr Blair's sofa style of government, sitting in sofas like this with a few cronies, deciding on policy, with the permanent civil service kind of squeezed out from the process.
I think all of the senior civil servants who have given evidence have made it clear that they felt that Blair kind of circumvented the normal processes in government, including them.
Yeah, although I think that isn't adequate on their part. I mean, I think there has been a massive capitulation by the civil service. All right, the Prime Minister, Tony Blair, tried to run the government largely without them, sidelining them. But they are the permanent civil service. They were meant to offer some resistance.
They capitulated to him in a way they didn't capitulate to Mrs Thatcher.
Oh, completely. I mean,
okay.
No,
I'm asking.
Mrs Thatcher was absolutely rules-bound. She was absolutely governed by the status quo ante. She did things in the traditional way.
I'm asking.
Whereas Mr Blair broke that. Mr Campbell didn't help Gordon Brown very much, though, did he?
Well, he wouldn't, would he? I mean, Campbell is a loyalist, and sometimes he's loyal to completely crazy people. I can say this about the Mirror guy, guy that fell over the side of a boat.
Maxwell.
Oh,
yeah.
Robert Maxwell.
He's loyal to madmen, and he's loyal to Blair. What can I say?
But it doesn't help Mr Brown. I mean, we all know he must have been involved, but to hear Alistair Campbell say it, he's kind of...
I think he did it deliberately, because he knows Gordon would far rather, for all sorts of reasons, put a big distance between himself.
But Alistair is, on the other hand, supposedly now helping the government to get re-elected.
Yeah, he seems very keen for Mr Brown to be re-elected, and that's not necessarily helpful. Is Nick Clegg right to say that the Prime Minister, the current Prime Minister, should appear before Chilcot this side of the election rather than the other side as is planned?
Well, of course. And Peter Hain has just said on Question Time that, of course, the Prime Minister would appear if he was summoned. But the question is, has the committee already been stitched up by a deal with Number 10 so that he won't be summoned?
Well, that comes back to Diane's point that it's an establishment committee.
Also, it's a clever... Clegg is right, actually, but it's also a clever political point, because nothing played better for the Lib Dems in the last general election than Iraq, and so they want to resurrect it.
Can Iraq still damage Labour in the election?
Depends how badly Blair's testimony goes.
Really?
I think so.
All right. Mr Brown, he bounced back pretty well this week, didn't he?
Yes. In fact, of course, he's had two rather good Prime Minister's questions, including the one the previous week, which was a few minutes before the news of the plot broke. Yes, no, he is in quite bouncy form.
And he's had 2 good weeks, as Michael said. He did well at PMQs. He's kind of discovered a sense of humour, which I know, having known him years ago, he used to have and then seemed to lose. It's still a bit leaden, but it's a lot better than it was. So he's doing all right, but he still needs something significant to happen to change the way things are going.
Yes, but it helps him that he's cheerful, that he's positive, that he's good on the floor of the House. He has the consolation of knowing that we have seen the last Blairite attempt to remove him.
That's
Anyone would feel good now.
On the other hand, well, I think a serious point is that the government still has massive contradictions on what its policy is as far as the public debt is concerned.
And you mean that Cameron hasn't?
And that they are immensely divided amongst themselves.
And you mean the Tory party isn't?
The Tory party, no, it's not divided. As far as
You need policies before you can be divided.
True, I apologise.
Thank you. On that unusual harmony, we move on. Now, do you remember Mr Bunn the baker? What about Mrs Potts, the painter's wife? Or Master Soot, the sweep's son?